Welcome back. It's always fun to do redrafts for recent drafts. The most recent draft I feel like I can do at all is 2019. I feel like 2020, yeah, it's still way too soon. 2019, honestly, probably a bit too soon, but it's still fun. So as I go through these, remember this is just a for fun thing. Summer redrafts are always enjoyable. I'm wearing the New Jersey Devils colors because New Jersey, they ended up winning the draft lottery and drafting first, and they drafted well. The number one player in this redraft is, in fact, Jack Hughes. It couldn't be anybody else, could it? There isn't anybody else in this draft that right now is close to Jack Hughes in terms of star power and ability and talent and just the fact that the New Jersey Devils right now are a bit of a wagon. That is on the fact that they've got Jack Hughes. So they did quite well drafting Heischer and then drafting Hughes. Those two are players that are keystones for this team for a long time to come. Now, number two to the Rangers, this is where things start to turn a little bit different. So Trevor Zegras, who of course is a member of the Anaheim Ducks, man, imagine if Zegras was on the Rangers. You had that level of creativity. Like Kakko, I think could still end up being a pretty good NHLer, and that kid line's been fun. But man, what would Zegras have been able to do with the Rangers? And that's where you get into the debate about whether or not the Rangers have a developmental problem or if it's something else. I would say the fact that there are very good young players on the Rangers tell me it's not really the development. It's just, Kakko's taking a little bit longer to get going. But Zegras, highlight reel goals, highlight reel assists as well. Very, very talented player, fast skater. Going to be a lot of fun to watch for a long time. Number three on the board, Chicago Blackhawks take Matt Boldy. I'm going to go out on a limb and say if they drafted Matt Boldy instead of Kirby Dach, Boldy's probably still there. Boldy has been fantastic for the Minnesota Wild. He is a player that they need because the Wild, of course, with their cap issues, which overshadow a lot of things, having a great young player like Boldy, who can play with another great young player in Kaprizov, gives you hope that maybe the Minnesota Wild are going to be able to get through this period of time, stay competitive, and then once they have that cap space back, they'll be able to maybe take a jump. But if he'd been drafted by Chicago, who knows? Number four to the Colorado Avalanche. So this is where it does get difficult. It does, because Dylan Cousins going at 4, I thought Cousins had a great year. Bowen Byram, I'm totally willing to take him at 4, but I can't really justify it at this point. He does get injured a lot. Cousins has been really good, had a great season for the Buffalo Sabres, was a big part of the reason that the Sabres offense surged this past season, and he looks like the real deal. So to me, Cousins ends up having to go at 4th. At 5th, moving up from where he was originally taken, Moritz Seider. So imagine if the LA Kings had taken Seider at 5. Now, first off, people would have been like, I can't believe they passed on Turcotte. But knowing what we know now, that would have looked really smart, in hindsight. Through no fault of Turcotte's. Turcotte actually doesn't end up showing up on the board for this redraft. Seider ends up moving up. And what's interesting is at the time that Seider was drafted 6th, there was a lot of naysaying, a lot of head shaking, and a lot of people saying, they could have got him later if they wanted. And then he ended up being an excellent rookie his first year. And even though his second year wasn't quite as stellar as his first, he is still an excellent young player. Number 6 on the board to Detroit, Cole Caulfield, or Goal Caulfield, however you want to refer to him. Caulfield had 26 goals this year for the Montreal Canadiens. Yes, missed almost half the season, hurt. Caulfield is fast, very strong skater, and excellent shot. Absolutely fantastic shot. And I mean, yeah, you'd miss Seider. I'm not going to pretend that you wouldn't in Detroit, but Caulfield would be a pretty good consolation prize as well. Which leaves us at number 7. And I'm going to write up the name, and then I'm going to be completely transparent on this here. So Bowen Byram, for me, personally, slots in at 7 based on what he's done thus far. Now, in terms of what Byram can do, what Byram might do over the next few years, if he can stay healthy and get prime minutes with the Colorado Avalanche, if I did this 3 years from now, I would not be surprised to see Byram as high as 2nd. I think Byram has a supreme talent level. He showed in the 2022 playoffs what he could do. It's a matter of staying healthy and staying in the lineup. And so for injury concern only, to me anyways, I have him at 7th. And again, that's why I mentioned Caulfield did miss roughly half the season. If you want to put Bowen Byram ahead of Caulfield, you can. It's interesting too because I wasn't really I was on the fence about the 2019 draft and doing a redraft of it until I saw the one that followers for JFresh had, and I was like, I love Caulfield, but it feels like he's too high. So I was like, yeah, I guess I have to do the redraft now. Number 8 on the board. So coming out of nowhere this past season, at least seeming to, is Matias Maccelli with Arizona. I have him going at 8th in the redraft to the Edmonton Oilers. Fantastic passer. Would have been in the conversation for Rookie of the Year far more than he was if he had a few more goals, played a few more games. But Maccelli is, I think he's a legit top 6 forward in the NHL. He's, again, one of the reasons why I think that Arizona's going to surprise people this coming season. But yeah, Maccelli, absolutely excellent season. Tenacious, hard worker, which you kind of have to be if you're going to make it onto your team when there's not a lot of hype around you. You have to kind of force your way into a job, which he did this past season. Number 9 on the board. Number 9 was... Just looking for it. There he is. So the Ducks, in losing Trevor Zegras, instead draft Kirby Dach. Another from this draft class that has had injury problems at times, right? And he's already on his second team with Montreal. But I don't think he's going anywhere from Montreal. I think the Habs are pretty happy with him. Dach is a good second line forward if he can stay healthy. I think he's going to be a really, really good second line forward. I don't know if he'll be a first liner in his career, but if you get a second liner, that's still pretty good. I still like Dach. I'm not as sold on him as I was when he first came up for Chicago. Guy looked like he was going to be an absolute beast. And then injuries have definitely taken their toll. So if he can stay healthy for a full season with Montreal, again, he might be a candidate to move up the board the next time I do this. But this is a pretty solid top 10. And at 10, the Vancouver Canucks draft. And this one stings a little bit. So initially drafting Vasily Podkolzin, it looked like the Canucks got a steal. That may still end up being the case. It's still, recent, this draft. But in all likelihood, Cam York at 10, while it would have been seen as a bit of a reach, Cam York is a really good defenseman for the Philadelphia Flyers. I think the Flyers are quite content with what he brings. And for Vancouver, it would have been interesting too, because it would have been seen at the time as drafting by position, which it looks like that's what they did this year. And yet, looking at it now, you could say, well, York is a really good defenseman, good young defenseman, could be exactly what the Canucks need. But again, Podkolzin at the time looked like a steal, and again, may end up being exactly that. Number 11 on the board from Dallas. And I'm going to admit this straight out. I think that Thomas Harley is a very good defenseman, and I think he's going to have a good year. I think in Dallas, he's been behind a pretty solid blue line, so he hasn't had quite the opportunities that he might have with a team that's lower in the standings and has more room on the blue line for him. But I like Harley's potential quite a bit. I think he's going to be very good. And as we go through this draft, a lot of it kind of turns into the potential. Because again, we're only 4 years out from the draft. So there's definitely goalies that haven't debuted yet. Forwards and defensemen that haven't debuted yet. That 2-3 years down the road, if I did this redraft again, who knows? They may very well be pretty high up. Number 12 for Minnesota. So they lose Boldy. And they gain an Alex Newhook. Alex Newhook, of course, in the offseason traded to the Montreal Canadiens. Newhook could very well become a second-line center. I think that's where the Avs wanted him to be, but it didn't quite work out this past season. But Newhook still has a ton of talent. And with the right off-season training and everything, he could be an excellent fit for the Montreal Canadiens. And seems to be anxious to play for them. So, Newhook, I like him. I like his game. It just didn't work out in Colorado. Maybe it'll work out in Montreal for him. Number 13 for Florida. I have them drafting a forward as well. Shane Pinto. Pinto this past season with Ottawa was good. Probably played more than the Sens would have wanted because of the injury to Josh Norris. I think that pushed him up the lineup. I think he's probably going to be penciled in as their third line center. And that might be the best spot for him. But Pinto can put the puck in the net. He's got some good talent. Good two-way forward. And so, Pinto, I think, is solid. at the number 13 spot. At 14, we're going with a goaltender who was originally drafted, I do believe, in that number 13 spot. So pretty close to where he was originally taken. I'm going to put Spencer Knight at 14. There's some risk with Spencer Knight, of course. He did spend time in the player assistance program this past season, but he should be back this year. And again, while this past season was a bit of an up and down year, he's a good goaltender. And I really couldn't bust him down further than 14. I didn't feel comfortable having him further down than 14. So Spencer Knight for me, the number 14 pick. Number 15 on the board. Now, this is where it gets tricky because I've been, scratching this one out and that one out and moving this one around and that one around. Oh, there it is. So Montreal drafting 15th. I almost paused it to look it up and find him, but there we go. Kaapo Kakko ends up going at 15th. So he's still a first rounder, but he's more middle of the first round rather than number 2 overall in the draft. And in Montreal, again, this is where it gets interesting. So for the New York Rangers, it does feel like Kakko and Lafreniere as well on a team that, had those top 2 line minutes ready. Maybe Kakko and Lafreniere develop and get to that top 6 production sooner. Maybe Kaapo Kakko in Montreal would have blossomed, right? That's absolutely possible. That being said, the draft rankings is based on what we've seen him in the NHL so far, and Kakko ends up at 15th. At 16th is, and I almost moved him up to 15th. I looked up the stats on these guys, and again, it really is difficult. There are some players still yet to come up that I'm like, like Ryan Johnson, for instance, defenseman, drafted 31st overall by the Sabres, could very well be a very good player for them this year, but we haven't seen him in the NHL yet. Now, Arthur Kaliev, we have. Arthur Kaliev has the talent. I don't think he's reached his peak yet with the LA Kings if he had been drafted by Colorado. So you get Kaliev, you get Cousins. I think that's a pretty good haul for Colorado at the draft. 2 good young forwards there. Kaliev, I like his potential. He hasn't really reached that offensive level yet, but I think a 25-30 goal season could be in the offing. At number 17, now people are going to know that this is a player that I like quite a bit. Based on this past season, it's a bit of a small sample size, but Raphael Harvey-Pinard, absolutely ridiculous on a Montreal team that needed somebody who could go out there and play the offensive game the way Harvey-Pinard did for them this past season. So Harvey-Pinard is one that, again, it's a small sample size, so maybe he ends up dropping if I do this redraft again in 3 years. But for right now and for what I saw of him towards the end of the year, I am absolutely bullish on the guy. We'll see how he does this coming season, but yeah, I felt like 17 was the right spot for him. At 18, a player who's been stuck in the minors. We've debated his play on this channel a few times. Nils Höglander. Höglander, of course, for Vancouver, playing down in Abbotsford. Had a decent season in Vancouver, or in Abbotsford, should be back in Vancouver this fall. Maybe that year in Abbotsford will really benefit him and his development. But yeah, Höglander to me at 18, I'm okay with. He did have some good games in the NHL. There are Canuck fans that swear that he is good enough to be a second/third line player. That he very least can be in that middle 6, and maybe this is the year that he gets there. At 19, to Ottawa. Philip Tomasino, which I've written down with 1 L and Philip. I'm pretty sure it is. Sometimes it's 2. But Philip, not in his name, but just general Philip. Sometimes you see 2, sometimes you see 1. But Philip Tomasino, good player for the Nashville Predators. We're getting into players now that have been in the NHL, in the AHL, back and forth a bit. Tomasino's going to get every opportunity to succeed this year with the Nashville Predators, a team that has opted to do kind of a bit of a reset, bit of a retool, maybe in the offing, but they still have cap space, and Trotz is open to making moves, so we'll see. But for me, Tomasino is the guy at number 19. At number 20, Winnipeg, I have taking Vasily Podkolzin. So Podkolzin drops from 10 to 20 in my redraft. He had some good shifts with Vancouver this past season. It was an up and down year. It was rough. I will say this. I think sometimes we underestimate the cultural shift coming over from Europe to play in North America. Not every player hits North American ice and just excels, right? Not every player comes over to play in North America, whether it's USA or Canada, and just it works. It's a completely different culture, and some players it takes longer to hit than others. And for Podkolzin, maybe he wasn't getting the right amount of ice time, the right opportunities. I heard those complaints with Podkolzin this year from Canuck fans, and it may very well be justified. But for a team that's always trying to make the playoffs rather than commit to a retool or a rebuild, it's going to negatively impact the ice time for young players like Podkolzin. So we'll see what he does this coming season. Number 21. 21 is to Pittsburgh. 1L or 2? 1. Yeah. See, now I'm looking, it's going to be 1 each time, isn't it? Philip Broberg. Philip Broberg, I still think that there's a potential top 4 defenseman there with Broberg. Defenseman can take a bit longer. Broberg, of course, drafted by the Edmonton Oilers in the first round in 2019. He has dropped on my redraft, but he's not outside the first round, so he does drop, but it's not like the Kings with Turcotte, right? Broberg, we'll see where he fits in with the Oilers this year. I would think that if he's not getting those top 6 minutes, maybe you hold him out there and see if somebody wants him in a trade, or we'll see where things turn out. Because really, for the Oilers, their blue line is, I think it's overly criticized, and I get it. And we'll see if Broberg can help to get that reputation turned around for the Edmonton Oilers. But in this redraft, he's drafted by Pittsburgh. LA drafting at 22. I'm taking Pavel Dorofeyev. Pavel Dorofeyev with the Vegas Golden Knights, absolutely fantastic this past season. It's only a 20-game segment, and that's where it gets tough because it is only 20 games. We'll see this coming season whether or not they have a spot for him. Maybe he spends the year in Henderson. But Dorofeyev looks very good and looks like an absolute steal for the Vegas Golden Knights, which they need, right? They need those prospects. They've traded off a lot of prospects in their short history. They've done a pretty good job of finding good young players like Whitecloud, like Haig, and I think Dorofeyev is in that category as well. So that's number 22. Number 23 on the board, the New York Islanders. And this is one of those ones who got traded by Vegas, Peyton Krebs. Peyton Krebs, of course, a member of the Buffalo Sabres currently, and probably will be for some time to come. But in this draft, he goes 23rd overall to the New York Islanders. I like Krebs. I think he's a good 4th liner in Buffalo. I think 3rd liner, he can do that. And there's still some top 6 outside the Krebs game. So at 23, I think that's the right spot. Now, you can argue Krebs as high, I think, as maybe 18th based on this past season. For me, I have him at 23rd and looking at potential and where they may be going this coming season. But again, this is where things get tough with the 2019 draft because it is so recent. Number 24. Oh, look at that. Look at that. It works out well, doesn't it? Juuso Parssinen. So, when I make the rankings for these draft videos now, I don't actually keep track of who had those picks or anything. But in this case, Nashville gets their player, Juuso Parssinen, who came in this year, hard worker. So even if there doesn't end up being a lot of offensive game there from Parssinen, good hard worker. And in the NHL, if you're a good hard-working bottom 6 forward, you're going to be able to have a job in the National Hockey League. So we'll see how much upside is there for him offensively, but I am pretty satisfied with him at the 24th spot. At 25th, Jacob Pelche for the Calgary Flames. And of course, famously, he came up, and the reaction to him coming up from Daryl Sutter was kind of anticlimactic to fans who weren't very happy about it. But in the end, Pelche got in some good games with the Calgary Flames, a lot of experience, and we'll see what that does for him this coming season and how much that helps to advance his game. A good player. There's not enough there, I think, at this point in time to move him up this list very far. But I will say that from 17 down, It really is fluid. There's a lot of scratching out and moving guys around just on this piece of paper in my book here, which I've used to try to get these guys all in an order. 26th, so instead of Pelche, another goaltender, Pyotr Kochetkov. Kochetkov has already got a $2 million a year contract with the Carolina Hurricanes. Looked very good for Carolina when he came up. He does look like he's going to be their starter. At this point, he's likely the number 3, though, behind Ronta and Anderson. We'll see how long that's the case. He may force himself into the conversation for the backup as soon as this fall. Kochetkov, very talented goaltender, pretty solid moves. We'll see as he gets exposed to the National Hockey League and hockey players get a chance to get a book on him, what happens. Because you can never tell with goaltenders, things can change quickly. But yeah, Kochetkov, solid goaltender so far in his career. And I think for Calgary fans, they might be okay with that. Now at 27, another goaltender. And I think the 2019 goaltenders are going to be pretty good. Silovs of Vancouver, also 2019 draft. But Mads Søgaard came up and had some decent games for the Ottawa Senators. I think their future in net is bright. The present is a bit of a question mark with the goaltending in Ottawa. Agreed. Korpisalo, we'll see how he does in Ottawa. He's been an up-and-down goaltender. We'll see how healthy Forsberg is and whether or not either of those goaltenders can really take the reins as a starter. But Søgaard, pretty good for another option. Mandolese was pretty good when he got called up too. So there's good depth in that organization. It's just a matter of making sure that the kids are ready when they come up and that they can handle the pressure of being a starter in the NHL or even just a backup. And Søgaard, I don't think he's far off. Number 28 on the board. To Carolina. So when I was looking up numbers for this draft, for the guys who were taken in the draft, Elmer Soderblom, who is huge, prospect from the Detroit Red Wings. The fact he's in the first round on this really is a testament to how well they draft. But his numbers in North America last year were kind of pedestrian. And that's fine because, again, he's young. And when it's a big forward, it can take him a little bit longer to develop. But, yeah, Soderblom, number 28. And, yeah, we'll see if he rockets up the chart or if he ends up off of it. He has that boomer bust potential. And so, yeah, I think he's the kind of player that, going back to Nashville, I think he's the kind of player Barry Trotz was talking to his scouts about. Get me that guy who might be a home run, has a high risk, because bottom 6 forwards, I can get you those all day long. He's not wrong on that either. Number 29. So the Winnipeg Jets, kind of developing a little bit of a reputation that Finnish players don't necessarily get a great chance. Laine, there was arguments about that. And now you've got Ville Heinola, who's going through this as well. I like Heinola. I think he's a good defenseman, but Winnipeg hasn't given him a lot of opportunities. We'll see whether or not Heinola ends up getting those opportunities in another organization. I think in Anaheim, I think that'd be a great fit. They really do like having young players in their lineup right now. Now, Anaheim has some good young prospects on the blue line, but Heinola's a little further along than guys like Mintyukov or Zellweger. So, yeah, we'll see how things go if Heinola ends up not making it to the Jets this year, because I think that's when we would start hearing, so Ville's decided he wants to trade. That's where I think that would show up. Number 30 on the board to Boston. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, and I'm saying that to Calgary fans. Dustin Wolf. Now, Dustin Wolf's played one game in the NHL. The reason that Wolf's on the board is because he showed at the Calgary Wranglers how good he is. He dropped in the draft because of his height. It really feels like it's a UC Saros situation, where a guy drops in the draft that probably shouldn't have, and it was a bit of a head scratcher at the time because it's not like he had bad numbers in junior. It's not like he had a bad attitude or interviewed poorly. Everything was there. And yet, because of his height, I would think that's probably why he dropped. Calgary could very well have him as one of their top 2 goalies this year if they decide to move. Vladar would be the most likely to get moved. But, yeah, Wolf is 30th in this. And again, Wolf, Søgaard, Kochetkov, and Knight. This is a pretty good draft class when it comes to goaltenders. We'll see 5 years down the road whether or not any of these guys are starters or what their reputation is and how they do when they get to playoff games, right? So the last one on this draft, so going at 31st overall, and I went back and forth on this one a little bit, but I was like, well, you know, he's going to get a shot this year, I think. From the LA Kings, Tobias Bjornfot, who had a good year with LA and then ends up the following season not playing much in LA. He's been an up and down player, and I felt like at 31, I'm fine with Bjornfot at that point. He was a first round draft pick initially, anyways. So honorable mentions: Jordan Spence, who I thought about putting in here, and Alexi Protas as well was one that I considered. Now Spence over Bjornfot, I might be able to make that argument, but looking at their numbers to this point in their careers, I had to put Bjornfot just ahead of Spence. So Spence would have been 32 if we'd had 32 teams in the league in 2019. So there you go. Another redraft for all you fine people on the internet. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I do expect this one to age poorly as the years go by, but that's the fun of it. When you're looking at a draft this recent, a lot of it is speculation and potential. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe. And one final question: which player who has yet to debut in the National Hockey League would be on this board, say, 3 to 5 years from now? Thank you guys so much for all your support. I want to say, too, having had so many meetups recently, it has been great. We had the best attendance at a meetup last night we've ever had. The community that's been built via this channel, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to people that invite friends out to meetups and everything, and it's great. So if I can keep that going during the regular season, I absolutely will. I wanted to throw that into this video because I know these videos always get a lot of views. And just to let people know, I really appreciate the community that's been built, and I intend to keep on building it for as long as I humanly can. Thank you again for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.